Today is May 3rd, 2013. We are introducing Mr. Richard Bogard at the American Legion in Peoria, Illinois. Mr. Bogard was born April 21st, 1926. Mr. Bogard is 86 years old. 87 years old. Mr. Bogard, I am Cheryl Walker. I am with the Illinois State Library, and I will be interviewing you today. Could you state for the record what branch of service you were in and what your rank was when you were discharged?
I was in the Army. I was in Company A, 30th Infantry, 3rd Division. I was PFC when I was discharged.
What year did you join the service, or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
Okay. And what year did you go into the service?
1944.
Okay. Do you remember getting your draft notice?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Can you remember what it said?
Not really. I know what it meant, but I don't know what it said.
Okay. And where did you go in?
I was inducted at Fort Sheridan, Illinois.
Okay. Would you like to share your story?
All right. I graduated from high school on D-Day, 1944. I received my draft notice. I had tried to get in the Air Corps, but they ruled me out because of astigmatism in my left eye. I also took the A12-V12 test, and they sent me a nice letter saying that I'd passed, but I was too old for the program, which meant I was too close to 18 years old. When I was inducted at Fort Sheridan, I spent about 3 days there. The first day of my life in the Army was KP, which really done me in. And about 3 days later, I boarded a train and I went to Camp Joseph T. Robinson in Little Rock, Arkansas, where I took 17 weeks of basic training. After the 17 weeks of basic training, I was fit to be a good infantryman, they thought. From there, I went to Fort Meade, Maryland, stayed there a little bit. From there to Camp Gilmer, New Jersey, and from there to New York City, where I boarded Queen Elizabeth for a nice 4.5-day route to Europe. We landed in Greenock, Scotland, boarded some trains down to Southampton. On there, we were put on a ship, and across the channel, we dropped depth charges all the way. We landed in Le Havre. We went to Camp Lucky Strike for a couple hours, and then proceeded down to the boxcars, where we were on boxcars for about 4 days. One day, we backed up farther than we went. We finally arrived at our destination, where we were put in a Repel depot, which is a replacement center. After a couple days in the replacement center, I was taken by truck up to the front lines, and I joined the 3rd Division there. And I asked the guy next to me, how far is the front lines? And he says, oh my God, here they come. I hadn't even loaded my rifle. I was charging out of After I joined the division, I was assigned to
and
it was a false alarm, Company A, and met the people that were in my squad. We only had 8 in our squad, and we only had 2 squads, and we were supposed to have 3 squads with 15, so you can see we were undermanned. 16 and supposed to have 45. A man by the name of Hudson was my squad leader, and a very nice man, looked like Clark Gable. I spent various opportunities to go on patrols and marches and everything. I actually didn't see a heck of a lot of combat because I didn't last very long. One day we were going forward, and we got to where we were going, and we dug in our holes. And I told Ed, my squad leader, I said, Ed, my foot is killing me. He said, well, go over to the aid station. And I said, okay. The aid station was over a little road, and he said, when you go across that road, get across fast. It's under machine gun fire. So as I got myself over, the machine gun fire started. I went to the aid station, and he looked at my foot, and he said, well, he says, I don't know. So he said, he bandaged it up, and I put my boot back on, and he said, you better go back to the aid station of the division. So he said, there's another guy here, Brown, he's got pneumonia, so you take him with you. Well, I said to Brown, I said, we better get the ammunition out of my hole because we might get pinned down. He said, I don't want to do that. I says, well, we have to do that. I no sooner got to my hole and we were under a barrage of mortar shells. A friend of mine I saw got hit, and I thought for sure he was dead, but found out later he wasn't. So we walked up along this canal, and it started to get dark, and I couldn't move very fast. And he said, I'm leaving you. You don't walk fast enough for me. So I was walking in the dark by myself, and I heard something coming down the road. And I thought, man, I'm hurting so bad, I'm going to give up no matter who it is. It happened to be a lieutenant in a Jeep, and he said, where are you going? I said, back to Battalion 8. He said, hop in, I'm going there too. So I said, I got a buddy that can't be too far away. And we went for a long distance before we found him, and he got in the Jeep, and it took us back to the aid station. Well, the officer there was not a doctor, but a medical officer. And he said, what's your problem? And I said, well, my foot has just killed me. He said, take your boot off. I took it off, and he said, that's a poor tape job. He ripped the tape off, rebandaged it, and he said, now back to the front. And I said, sir, I just barely made it back here. I have no way to get back. He said, you're just scared. And I says, you're right, I'm scared, but I still can't make it. So he said, there's a foxhole out behind the hut here. And he said, you sleep there tonight. So I said, okay. So I got there. And I don't know, sometime during the night, I kicked off my other boot. And my foot was swollen up clear to my knee. And I couldn't even stand up. So I crawled on my hands and knees back to the aid station. And I said, Lieutenant, different foot. Take a look. He said, oh my God. He said, we're going to have to evacuate you. And he said, there's a load of German prisoners going in. He said, you go with them. So without any help, I got on my hands and knees, and I'm crawling out of the hut. The Germans saw me, and they picked me up and put me in the truck. The truck went back to the next town, and all the Germans got out. No, you're not getting out here. He gets out. So they picked me up and carried me into the waiting place. I sat there for maybe an hour or two, and the doctor came around. And he said, oh, boy. He said, we're going to evacuate you. You go in the next ambulance. So 4 of us were put in on litters into the ambulance and back to the field hospital. And, of course, there's snow all over every place at this time. And laid me on the litter in the snow, and pretty soon a corporal came up, and he said, you're from Illinois, because they put a tag on you, what state you're from. And I said, yeah, I'm from Peoria. And he said, I'm from Peoria too. And we didn't know each other, but he said, I'm getting you out of here right now. So I spent the night in the field hospital, and then the next morning I boarded a train, and we went all the way down to Aix-en-Provence to the 43rd General Hospital, where I spent a month or two without being able to get out of bed until the swelling went down. And then one day the major came around and he says, put your feet over the bed. And then he went to see a couple others, and he came back and he said, you're no good here over, send him home. So I waited for my hospital ship at Marseille, and it put me on the hospital ship at Marseille. Took about 14 days to get back to Charleston, South Carolina, where they put me in the Stark General Hospital for a day or two. And that was, I landed one day after my 19th birthday. So they had a choice of sending me either to Galesburg, Illinois, or Camp Carson, Colorado. And of course, me being from Illinois, I got sent to Camp Carson, Colorado. So I spent the rest of my time there rehabilitating. And finally, I was able to walk about a mile, and they said, you're up for discharge. So I got discharged, came home, and I originally had 10% disability. But I talked to some other veterans in the organization. They said, what's your disability problem? I said, my feet. And they said, both of them? I said, yeah. I said, what's your disability? I said, 10%. He said, that's wrong. It's 2 injuries, 1 to each foot. You're entitled to at least 20%. So when I got back home, I was in Florida at the time. When I got back home, I decided to go to the VA and find out what was what. So the AMVET set me up with an appointment to go to Iowa City to see the doctors. Well, the doctor, there were 2 of them, and they said, what's your story? So I told them the same kind of story I'm telling you. And they said, well, you thought you weren't going to examine you. And I said, I was beginning to think so. So they said, take off your boots. So I took off my shoes and they looked, they shook their head, put them back on. So sometime later I was 60% disabled. And I guess that's about the end of my story. I'm still alive. I'm happy. I enjoyed my time in the service, and I enjoy giving this interview.
Let me ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Okay, so you said that you landed in Scotland,
Greenock, Scotland.
Greenock, Scotland, and
The reason being that the ship was so big that they only had certain harbors they could go into. And I was unloaded off of the Queen Elizabeth onto a boat called the Prince Albert, which is a pretty large size vessel to use to get us in. And I looked back and I thought it looked like a hotel sitting in the water.
So it was even bigger than the ship that you came over on.
No. The little ship. But when I was on the little ship, I saw how big the Queen Elizabeth was.
The Queen Elizabeth was.
They said we had 20,000 troops on board.
Oh my goodness.
And we were stacked 6 high, and it wasn't a nice journey.
So in the rooms you were stacked 6 high.
We were down in below deck. They said we were over the old swimming pool. But there's 6 high bunks.
So they converted the Queen Mary.
For troops.
Okay. So when you went down the canal.
No, we landed, and then they took us off the ship onto the Queen, out of the other one, Prince Albert, I believe his name it was. They marched us into a building where they fed us, and I happened to be near the front of the line, so I was up on about the 4th floor, last in line.
Okay.
And then we boarded the trains and down through England to Southampton and across the Channel.
Okay. And then your destination was France?
France. Mm-hmm.
So you were in France the whole time?
The whole time. Just almost got to Germany, but not quite. I was in the Colmar pocket, it's called, which they said was worse than the Battle of the Bulge because we had more casualties. Me being one of them.
Did they ever figure out what was wrong with your feet?
So they were frozen, severely frozen. That's what trench foot is.
So you had trench foot.
Trench foot. And that's severely frozen feet. And there's no cure for it. They just put you in bed and let you lay there. A double-headed bed. Feet out one end, head out the other.
If they would have treated that sooner, would it have been as severe?
They couldn't treat it sooner.
They couldn't.
No.
But if they would not have sent you back?
They didn't know what was wrong with me, and I didn't either. I didn't know I froze my feet. You know, I hurt, and at the beginning there wasn't any swelling. It was after I had both my boots off that they swelled up to my knee. I was really lucky because I asked a friend of mine, did he ever know what happened? I said, I know the squad leader got killed, husband. He said, you didn't hear about that? And I said, no. He said, your whole squad was bedded down in a barn that took a direct hit, and all of them got killed. So see how lucky I was? To have frozen feet, that saved my life. I would have been dead.
So your squad was destined to go to Germany. Was that correct?
Well, we were trying to end the war, yes.
Okay. And after you were treated, you and another soldier were told to go back to the front line with your squad.
Yes.
And did they give you directions on how to get there?
I knew how to get back there, but I just couldn't do it, you know. Mm-hmm. And it turned out the next day I couldn't even stand up.
So how many months were you over there?
My whole career in the Army was a year.
So you were there from 1945 to 1946.
44 to 45.
1944 to 45.
Mm-hmm. Things happened to me very quickly.
Yes, they did. Your basic training and then your advanced training, did you feel that you were equipped to go over and fight that early in your life?
Well, I had never fired a weapon in my life. I was an athlete and I was in good physical condition, but like everybody else that has never done it, I didn't know what it was going to be like. And like the guy said, "You're scared," and I said, "Yes, I'm scared." You know, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get shot. Um, and being not a real outdoor person in snow and cold weather, uh, I hadn't experienced that before because I'm not a hunter. So I had never been out in the wild shooting a weapon. I've never fired a weapon since. I don't care for them.
What was your food situation like? What was the
We always had
supplies?
K rations or C rations. I liked the Hershey bars they had that were made so for the South Pacific actually that wouldn't melt, and I would just gnaw on those. And one of the reasons I did that is, but um, believe it or not, I can never remember, and it's blocked out of my mind, ever going to the bathroom outside. I can't remember that. And man, one of the reasons, I guess the chocolate bar, I didn't have enough. I'll tell you one other thing that I weighed 175 pounds when I went in. And when they were able to weigh me in the hospital after several weeks, I only weighed 134. So in that short time, I lost all that weight.
Hmm. So, the stress, the K rations, the C rations were not giving you the the protein and the carbohydrates and whatever that you needed.
I guess not.
Hmm. That's a lot of weight to lose that
Yeah.
fast. Do you remember coming home and actually getting a good meal?
Oh, yeah. When I was in the hospital, we got good food, and we had excellent food on the hospital ship. I was seasick for 5 days, and yet on a 15-day trip, I gained 5 pounds. So I did. The only bad part of the going home on the hospital ship, the nurse that was in charge of us at night came around with Nembutal sleeping pill and gave everybody one. Well, she wanted everybody to sleep so they wouldn't cause any problem. But she came around the next night. I slept the whole night and half the next day. And when she came around the next night, I said, "You get away from me."
So you didn't take it
I
anymore.
didn't take any more. No, I didn't have any trouble sleeping.
Um, did your family get a letter stating that you had been hurt?
They got postcards hmm saying I had a cold injury.
A cold
A
injury.
cold injury.
So they didn't know
No,
how severe the injury was.
they didn't know. They knew I was in the hospital, but they didn't. But they were notified that I was in the hospital. That was a cold injury. There was just a postcard that said cold injury, hospital. That's all. Of
Hmm.
course, I was able to write letters after that, and they knew I could tell them why I was there.
Did your family get to come visit you when you were in
Oh
the
no, no, the war was going on.
during the state when you came to
Oh
the
no,
state?
no, no. Still wartime. Yeah, transportation was for the military mostly. Unless you were in business that had something to do, they probably couldn't do it. There was no reason to come and visit me.
That's a lonely time.
Mm. I had buddies in there. We always had buddies wherever we were. People that we associated with, people we liked.
Did you stay in contact with any of them?
Just one still. He lives in California, and we telephone each other every once in a while. I went in as a replacement with 13 guys from my basic training. One of them was killed, and all the rest of them died natural deaths, and I'm the only one left. And my friend didn't take basic training, but He and I are the only two that, as far as I know, that are still alive.
And did you meet him in overseas?
Overseas. We went in together. He was trained in Indiana, and he and I joined, and we were in the same outfit, Company A, 3rd Division, 30th Infantry.
And did he get hurt?
No, no, he went through the whole war, never got hurt.
My goodness. Now, when you got out of the service, what did you do?
When I got out of the service, I was going to college, and I had to take physical and mental examinations to determine what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be a pharmacist. And the psychologist that examined me, he said, pharmacy. I said, yeah, well, you beat people all the time. I said, I'm good for that. He said, I thought you'd be a social worker. Well, we're a social worker as a pharmacist. And he said, I'm going to give you a 100% recommendation. So I went to University of Michigan and got my pharmacy degree. And then when I got out, my father lent me the money, and I started a drugstore.
And did you own your own drugstore?
Yep.
For the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
Here in Peoria?
Mm-hmm. Back, we had 5 of them in the end. And I was the president and the CEO. And I'm still working part-time for IV now. I work 12 hours a week as a part-time pharmacist.
Amazing.
Which keeps my hand in it.
Amazing. One thing that you mentioned when you were telling your story was when you were 18, you applied for a program, but you were too old.
Too old.
And what was that program?
A12, V12. It was a college program. But in the end, all the guys that got into that program ended up in the infantry, so I wouldn't have gained anything.
And can you tell me? I've never heard of that program. Can you tell me
well,
what
it was a program that you took an examination to see if you're college material, and if you passed, they put you in different colleges learning a trade that they wanted for the Army or the Navy or whatever, so that you could do the job. But I was too close to 18, and they knew I was going to get drafted, so I didn't get a chance to go.
If it was a college program and you were too old at 18 or too close at 18?
Too close to 18 because I was going to get drafted.
But
because I'd already tried to enlist in the Air Corps, and I had astigmatism, and I didn't want to get in the Navy because I can't swim. So when I had my choice of the Army, the Navy, or the Marines when I got drafted, and I took the Army. And a friend of mine, I was a pitcher and he was a catcher on the baseball team, so I said, let's just stay around and play ball until they draft us. And he's 3 days older than I am, so he got drafted 3 days before I did, and he wanted the Navy. So when I got to Fort Sheridan, there he was. He was so mad at me, he chased me all over the place. He'd have probably killed me if he caught me. And then we spent our basic training together. I was on the top bunk and he was on the bottom bunk in the same hut. And in the last week of basic training, he got a hand injury, so he didn't go. But he later went and was in the 28th Infantry Division. He helped capture the Germans swimming the Elbe River. So, and he's deceased now too. So, good friend of mine. We went to school together. So. Anything else?
Do you feel okay? You belong to the American Legion.
Mm-hmm. I'm not an active member.
Okay. You said that you had the AMVETS help you.
Yep.
And do you belong to any other organizations?
Disabled DAV I belong to. I belong to several infantry associations. The 3rd Division has a convention every year. This year it's going to be up around Chicago. And Now most of the guys coming are Korean veterans. The World War II veterans are slowly dying off.
And where all have you gone with these conventions for the 3rd Infantry?
Well, I went to Savannah, Georgia, and New Orleans. I've been to 3 of them. New Orleans, I got sick and I missed the whole darn thing except the first night, and I was really sick.
Are you active in any of the organizations that you belong to?
Well, yeah,
Besides the,
in the Illinois Pharmacists Association, I'm a past president,
mhm.
and the local organization, I've been a member forever of that. We don't meet too often anymore because there's not a lot of independent drugstores left, so, and the chain stores don't seem to be interested.
do so you did go to the VA to get your disability. Did you take advantage of any of the other benefits? Do you go to the Veterans Hospital for your medical?
I get my prescriptions from the VA here,
Hmm.
and since I'm disabled, I don't have to pay for them. I get everything but about 3 things that I take, and those I buy. I don't get those because they don't have them. So that, I'll tell you another interesting thing. About 2 or 3 years ago, I received the Legion of Honor from the French government, and it was they just gave it to different individuals because we helped save the country from the Germans. I was awarded the medal on board a destroyer in the harbor at Miami, and that was a great experience. There were about 10 of us that got the medal, but it wasn't for anything that we did personally. It was the fact that we were part of the group that helped save their country. And the thing that stood out in my mind, when I left the ship, I left it as an individual. They blew whatever they blow on their whistle, and I went down the gangplank by myself. No one else was allowed to go with me. And that was same for every veteran, same for the 10 guys. But it was a fantastic deal.
Do you feel, okay, let me ask you this. Have you ever been on the honor flight?
Yes.
And
I went out of
as,
Springfield.
okay, as a veteran with World War II,
Mm-hmm.
how did you feel?
Well, I felt honored and I felt amazed at what they did for us. There was each person had a guardian, and also all of us were in wheelchairs because we couldn't walk as far as we were supposed to. And I was really impressed with the memorials, but the one that was unusual was the Korean one, and that was it. And then the other thing, they took us to an air museum, which was really big, and they planned to make it even bigger. Had all kinds of airplanes in there, and that was impressive. The other thing was when we came back, they had mail call for us. And then when we got off the plane, everybody had to wait. And we walked out. There must have been 5,000 people in that airport cheering and everything. And I'll tell you, I shook so many hands, I thought I was a politician. Really impressive. Brought tears to my eyes.
Okay, that brings me back to a couple questions.
Okay.
The mail call on the honor flight
Mm-hmm.
was so important.
Yes, it was.
The mail call when you were serving, was that as important?
Probably more important, actually.
Okay, and why was that?
It's a word from home. You know, we were away from home, being 18 years old. You weren't used to being like we were, and mail call was really important.
And
I'm surprised they got the mail to us as well as they did.
okay, so did you get letters from not only family member when you were in the service?
Sure.
Did you get them from friends,
Ex-girlfriends, yeah.
neighbors?
Yeah,
Pastors?
everybody was encouraged to write to us, and we got a lot of mail, especially when I was in the hospital because I was stationary. I had one letter that followed me the whole career in the Army. Finally, ended up with in the hospital and at the 43rd General.
Really?
Started out down in Arkansas and went to each place I'd been, and finally caught up with me in the hospital.
Do you remember what that letter was?
Yeah, it was from a friend of mine. I don't remember what it said, but
Did you keep it?
I yeah I kept it till my wife threw it away, and I was mad at her for doing that.
Did you keep any? Do you still have any of your letters?
Mm.
No.
No,
But that was the important. What about you said that, the 500 people welcoming you back from that honor flight. How was your welcome home from your service? Do you have a memory of it?
yeah, my dad met me at the train in Galesburg.
Hmm.
Mostly soldiers going someplace, and then I went from Denver to Galesburg, Illinois, on the Denver fire chief or whatever they call it. So, and he came over and got me, and we went home.
So in World War II, you do see in films, you see in some of the movies, the welcome home from World War II with big parade. When the
Hmm.
war ended, you saw a big parade. But that wasn't the everyday welcome home, was it?
No, I can tell you that when I got in hospital in Colorado Springs, Camp Carson, they gave me a delay furlough, and I came home, and I happened to be home May the 8th, which was the end of the war in Europe. And my mom woke me up and said, "The war's over." And I said, "Mom, the war isn't over, and there's no reason to celebrate this because I may have to go to the South Pacific if I recover enough because I'm trained." Fortunately, I wasn't. And then I was discharged when the war in August ended. There was a big celebration, and I took the streetcar downtown, and I don't know what I did, but I didn't even come home that night. So it was really something then because everybody was celebrating.
Do you feel, as a veteran of World War II, that you were forgotten?
No,
No.
no. I think the Korean ones were. I think what's going on now, uh, it's not like World War II. World War II was the big thing. World War I was supposed to save everything. World War II definitely was going to save everything. Wrong. But I don't think the boys in there now are appreciated like we were because there were so many more of us.
Do you think that schools teach enough about the military and about what actually through history, through the wars, not necessarily the killing, but what actually took place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you think it's taught in schools today?
No, some people don't even know what World War II was, unfortunately. Um, they do things, to celebrate the end of the war, but some of them wonder what we're celebrating. I really don't think they're taught enough about it. The war to end all wars, and then the other one that was supposed to end them. I liked history when I went to school, and especially U.S. history. But we were taught much better, I think, back in the old days than they do today. It's different. I can't tell you why it's different because I'm not there to observe it. But when they don't know different things, that they should know. It's a sad story. Our heritage is important.
If a young child came to you or a young person came to you today and said, I think I might join the military, what do you think? What would you tell them?
Right now, I think it would be a good thing because, you know, jobs are hard to find. Uh, we visited some of the camps on our 3rd Division reunions, and they make pretty good money now. We made, you know, my highest pay was, net pay was $36 a month. And now I talked to a private, and I think he told me he was making $40,000 a year. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And they're married, they got kids. And I mean, the people that we met in the military now are really sharp people, friendly, uh, doing their job. So I think this is all voluntary army. You know, it's not no draftees like me. They're there because they want to be there, and they're getting a good education, and they're healthy. So the answer is, I think, you know, it's good.
If there was one thing that you took away from your time in the military, good or bad, what was that?
Well, don't bunch up, stay away from the other guy so you all don't kill at once. That was what they talked to us about. I think I probably would, being never fired a rifle or anything before I went in, I think they could have given me more training with the weapons. Some of those guys were really good. They could tear down a rifle blindfolded and put it back together. I had a hard time doing that. So that would have been the thing that I would. I suppose they do now, but and they were trying to get us ready, get us over there anyhow, because the reason we went so fast was they were having a problem over in Europe, and we were the replacements. So when the Battle of Bulge was going on, this area where in Germany on the border by the Rhine River was equally as bad, and they needed, like I said, we only had 2 squads of 8 people, and we're supposed to have 3 of 15, so they were shorthanded.
Well, Mr. Bogard,
Call me Dick.
Okay, Dick. I would like to thank you for serving our country, for giving your time, for doing a part to make our country free. And I would also like to thank you for your interview today.
Okay.
I appreciate everything you have done.
Do we get a copy of this or anything?
Yes, you do.